And we're live. It's Wednesday, so you know what that means. It must be Woke Women Wednesday. This is Senator Dianne Wilkerson with you here this morning. I hope you all are staying cool. We're all trying. Another exciting show today, as I promised you. We have been on this mission around information and economic I call it the economic reality of Blackness. Before we do that, you know my pitch. Every Wednesday, I start by saying thank you to the women with a vision who had this idea 2 years ago in May of 2020, not even planning around COVID, but just knowing that as a community, it is important that we have mediums to get information to our people in a timely fashion. And WWOC Media was born. On Wednesday morning, I come to you at 11, bringing you information, I'd say all things Black, Brown, and COVID, and which means everything, because COVID has touched every aspect of our life. And at 8 p.m. on Wednesday evening, my fierce and fearless warrior, City Councilor Julie Mejia, she closes it out. And she's always bringing you knowledge and excitement. So this morning, continuing our conversation about, as I said, all things Black, Brown, and COVID, we've been talking about just the new landscape, what our community looks like. We talk a lot about the after COVID reality in terms of health and the statistics. And we've been talking as well about the economics of COVID. When we started this pandemic journey, if you recall, the federal government predicted that some 40% of businesses in the United States would go under during COVID. And what I always say, when they say 40, I heard 80, right? When they say 40, I know for us, it's going to mean a whole lot more. And so a special attention had to be made to stabilizing, or at least maintaining, this very fragile economic base that we have. And you saw it, corporations, governments, new entities, all started focusing on what do we do around racial justice and social equity to make sure that the economics don't come crashing down. And one of those things that grew, I would say, during COVID is an organization called the New Commonwealth Fund. And so today, I'm so excited to have Dr. Makiba McQuarrie, who is actually the president and CEO?
President, yeah. President.
The president,
Yeah.
Boss lady, right? As I said in my post, she's running it, right? So, and a lot of people actually are learning and will be learning about the New Commonwealth Fund as they're listening to you today. So, Dr. McQuarrie, I'm going to really get you right to it. Like, first, just how'd you get there? Because for many people, this may be an introduction to Dr. McQuarrie, and also what is this fund and what are you doing?
First, I just want to say thank you, Senator Wilkerson, for having me on and allowing us the opportunity to actually talk about this work. It's moving really quickly. And I often forget that, we all do that. Your own universe is not known to everybody else. And so it's a real privilege to get a chance to share what we're learning and what we're working on. So the New Commonwealth Fund was certainly born out of the pandemic, the crisis of multiple Black bodies being murdered on live stream.
Post George Floyd, right?
Yeah. Yes. And but I like to remind folks that it didn't just begin then. It has not stopped happening now. And so this is not a moment in time. This is actually work that will need to continue and aggressively continue. And that work is us driving dollars, real dollars, into the hands of Black and Brown nonprofit leaders across the Commonwealth who are looking for unrestricted operating dollars. This is not, build a program that we direct so that you can take these, this philanthropic investment. It's sure, tell us what you need, tell us the work you're doing, but take this money and make sure that you can keep the lights on, keep people working every day, make sure that there's, infrastructure in place, or direct it to programming that you see fit.
So important, because I know that, in your background, you've been in organizations or been in a space in Boston in particular and are aware of those struggles day to day that organizations generally experience. And then the organizations that focus on vulnerable populations seem to have even a bigger challenge, particularly when they are grown out of that very community. You could talk about what, so is it a, like you walk in the door and you get put through the same ringer and string of criterias as if you're walking into a bank? You're smiling, so you probably
I'm
heard
so
this.
yeah, no, I'm glad you're asking me that, because and to back up, because you did ask me sort of how I found myself here. I was at the Boston Public Schools for some time and worked for the city of Boston.
You elevate your voice a little louder, because
Oh, sure, maybe I can get
perfect.
closer.
Yes.
Okay. So I worked for the Boston Public Schools for the city of Boston for a period of time. And then I transitioned to the Museum of Fine Arts Boston for 2.5 years. When this opportunity came along, it actually was not a thought that I would be leading it. I thought, I'm going to do whatever I can, because 19 Black and Brown C-suite professionals across this state stepped forward, and they essentially said to the CEOs of these institutions, these corporations, we need to make a commitment to a new way of investing in Black and Brown leadership. And I'm going to stand in front of it, not the institution, because I am the one for whom this is most impactful.
The face. That's right.
And it's my people. And they oh, I'm so sorry. I knew that was maybe going to happen.
I tell people this is like life. So
Okay.
When children cry, dogs bark, right?
Okay.
I've had smoke detectors go off. Just keep it moving. It's how we live, right? With the kids.
If
footballs flying over your head.
Right. So they did that at, frankly, I think, some peril to their own positionality. We don't get into those positions easily, and to step forward differently is not easy. So I'm gonna make him stop, since you said this is real life. Excuse me for 1 minute.
Oh, sure. And while she's gone, just so that I want to recap what I heard Dr. McCurry say, because I think that this is the piece that is so exciting to me about the new Commonwealth Fund. Is she said 19 Black folks from the C-suite, meaning top level corporate executives who went to their respective places, and CEOs. Some of them actually we have a few CEOs, I think, and said, this is the reality for the community that I care about, and I want, and we have to be involved, and I want to be that face. But the community, corporations, you all must have a nickel in this quarter, and that's what the fund is, representative of those 19 different conversations. And maybe you can tell us some about who they are. But go ahead, you can pick up where you left off and then add that later.
Well, the next piece of information that I think is really important for folks to know is that they, in 18 months, I was not a part of the organization, they raised $30 million. And they not only raised the money, they also did a grant making process that pushed $3 million out the door, and then another $3 million. And we just finished a round of $3 million. So right now we are at a corpus of $35 million. We have a $100 million goal, and we have about $9 million in play in the hands of nonprofit leaders who cover 4 different areas. One is policing and criminal justice reform, of course. One, absolutely, around health equity. We have a really strong focus right now in a partnership with MGB that is looking at maternal health equity, particularly for Black and Brown women. We have, of course, the importance of youth development and education, and then economic empowerment, which I know is near and dear to your current focus and has always been through your career. And so we're looking at how to get to 100 million, but also how to continue to not hold on to wealth. Philanthropy really was created by white folks to hold on to their wealth, not to release it. That's why, you spin off 5% of an endowment, but you're holding on to 95%.
That's right.
So the rest of it for what?
But if the endowment's big enough, right? You can do that. And
that's
still
right.
do a lot of good.
That's right. And so I was smiling earlier. What did you say to me that made me smile? Because I think that was
I said, are you like the bank? You know what I mean? Like people walk in and you put, you know what happens. Like sometimes the programs that are created for the folks who don't get to walk in the front door end up with the same kind of criteria that they would have faced, and they still end up with nothing.
I came into this role, and all of my colleagues in the different foundations were talking a lot about trust-based philanthropy. And this sort of idea that, there should be less hoops to jump through, there should be less rigor, frankly, and expectations of what happens up front. And it kept sort of rubbing me the wrong way, because I kept thinking, well, but if there's no accountability, which is what it starts to sort of feel like, are we actually saying that this individual leader is not capable of being accountable? Because I actually think that not only are, but they should be telling us what accountability looks like for them, what success looks like for them. And if I say, Dianne, I really trust you to do good stuff with these dollars.
Right.
I'm setting up a power differential there that's just exactly like, I think, the rest of the I'm
totally
interested in respect-based philanthropy is what that's the last thing I was going to say.
So let me share with you an experience that we had, and you're right. This is, and I said we're all going to be talking about our lives, kind of like BC and AC, before COVID, after COVID, right? So focused on this economic reality, but I had the privilege to start the co-found the Black Boston COVID-19 Coalition. And our goal initially was just to make sure that our community got the necessary resources to be able to deal with this thing that no one knew what it was we were really getting into. And remember, in March, April 2020, all we knew is this thing called the coronavirus. Remember, it was no COVID-19, it was the coronavirus. And so we started advocating around testing and just the information. And then we were up on Mother's Day, right? So Mother's Day is coming. The whole city is in isolation. And we thought about, well, what can we do? Well, in rides on the White Horse, the Boston NAACP, Tanisha Sullivan, who partnered with us, and we ended up contracting with 6 of our restaurants to make sure that our moms, the community's moms, particularly those that were living in senior developments, had a nice, beautiful meal for Mother's Day, because we knew that their families were not likely to be able to get access. And so we ended up, we served 2,400 meals that day. But here's what happened. A few months later, the annual recertification time for our local restaurants, and the very few that had beer and alcohol licenses, came due. And so they all get a notice saying you've got to pay your license. This was in actually November 2020, which is when this happened. You got to pay your licenses or you're going to lose them. And of course, the phone starts ringing. Dianne, Senator Dianne, we're closed. We have been closed. We have no revenue. How are we supposed to, how are we supposed to pay when, by virtue of a declaration of emergency, we're all shut down? And it really forced the conversation that you spoke of. And so here's the deal. The city of Boston creates a fund, that initial fund for businesses. And one of the first several questions people ask, do you have any liens? Do you owe any taxes? And they're all telling me, of course we do. We all do. And if that's the criteria, we're never going to get any relief, because we're in this situation because we have generated no revenue. And so that was really the thinking behind my question to you, that you have to be able to sit in front of a banker, named Dr. McCurry, and share with her that story, so that she understands that when I say are you going to put them through the same ringer, that's what I mean. Yeah. So your answer already, I get it. You're like,
I mean, I was even, I was encouraged by other folks who are in sort of traditional philanthropic entities. They said to me, don't give up your flexibility. Don't give up the fact that you don't have 100-year-old board of directors that are, kind of stuck in the bylaws of the past. And so instead of us even deciding what we were going to use for metrics, to evaluate the success of. I invited 20 Black and Brown nonprofit leaders to join us. We compensated them 1 day a week, or 1 day a month, sorry, for the last 6 months to help us co-construct an impact measurement tool. And what we're asking, the questions we're asking is, what does systemic racism look like when it's weaponized at the individual level, at the community level, at the systems level, at the policy level? And how do we deconstruct that? What do we need in order to influence that deconstruction? That is where NCF should be supporting these organizations in filling the gaps, not just dollars. There's a lot of other resources out there as well, but both money, time, treasure, talent, to make sure that we are actually giving them the fuel they need. They know what to do. They know how to do this work.
That's exactly right. So what kind of activities, do you fund? What is NCF funding?
Yeah, we have. I mean, the fun part for me was, unfortunately, I started during COVID, so I didn't get to go out and do physical site visits, but I met everybody on Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And the fun part for me is I'm a Boston girl. I haven't spent a lot of time in other parts of the state. I've spent a lot of time outside of the state, but not in the state. And I learned about, there's a brother in Western Mass who started a hydroponic farm that is on the back of a truck that's intergenerational in response to the pandemic. Ex-military. Like he said, Makiba, I woke up one day and I realized that, I read a stat about the number of high school children who go to sleep or go to bed without a meal at night. And I just knew that this was my gift back. Of course, folks in Chelsea turned their organization, Gladys Vega turned it into a soup kitchen immediately. Boom.
Oh, I know. She's been a guest actually on Wednesday on WWOC. So, and she actually had her camera up that day, so I could see the people that were there. That's Gladys, right?
Yes. There's a young man who's in Lawrence who's running an artists collaborative for young people to do a lot of public art, but really poetry, music, cathartic, sort of getting through sort of the developmental pains of what it's like to be an adolescent while the world is shut down. And obviously there was some pre-stories to that, and there's still stories happening now. And then we have some incredible folks working at the policy level. Leon Smith is working in the criminal justice reform space around policy reform. Smaller, tiny organizations. Oh, Ayanna Auberg. I could go on forever. Ayanna Auberg, Sisters Unchained. This is a young woman who has garnered together all of these other young people for whom their parents are incarcerated previously or currently, and they've created their own support group for each other. Not a big shop, not a huge infrastructure. Nashira Burrill bringing a birth center into hopefully Roxbury, Mission Hill, Jamaica Plain, in the next 12 months to help support Black and Brown women understanding that, traditional birth is not necessarily in a hospital. There are lots of other ways to bring a child into this world and or to think about your body with or without child. So, I mean, I could really, they're incredible.
Yeah.
We have over 80 organizations.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. The question, and so the fund is available for nonprofit business, nonprofit organizations.
Currently, we're waiting for our 501c3 designation. So currently we are a donor advised fund at the Boston Foundation, which means that we fall within their guardrails of how they make their grant making. But lots of really interesting conversations we're having around what it would mean to be able to invest in businesses and small business owners. And something I'm really excited about that I think we'll be able to explore further. And there are also a lot of nonprofits that are doing work that we can use as the pass through to get dollars out to for-profit entities, to individuals. So we're looking at that. And I think we're also thinking about how we narrow and get really targeted. We've reduced our statewide approach to 13 gateway cities. But we continue to look across all of the pillars. And this year we will open up our $3 million grant cycle in probably January, February, for one more distribution by June, the end of our fiscal year. And And then at that point in time, what I'm spending my time doing right now are two things. One, working hard to get a structure to raise that additional $70 million. And two, going really deep into some research and data analysis to help hone in. Look, we don't want to boil the ocean. And while $3 million a year and $100 million a year sounds amazing and incredible, it goes fast, especially given how little our people have received in comparison to white nonprofit leaders across this Commonwealth and across the nation.
So one of the things that, and you said you were in deep kind of the research, because the facts don't lie. You know, I have been especially, I would say, struck, amazed, and bothered watching the distribution of the monies that have come into Massachusetts, and I'm talking about federal dollars. To be clear, I don't know that people really appreciate what I call the fact we have a rock star congressional delegation, and my guess, I've never compared them dollar for dollar to what other cities and what other states are getting. But what I do know is that $142 billion has been delivered to Massachusetts for COVID-related activity and services in 27 months. That, and $142 billion, not million, that's a lot of money. And that's the money used to pay to keep the hospitals supportive and the nursing homes and all of the things, the schools and all the testing, all the things that the state has done. And that's not included the money that came here and went directly to the city of Boston, which has their own little war chest. But here's the thing about the $142 billion, if you think of the categories. The president could not have been clearer. And even the governor in the statements and the kind of the lead up, I remember before vaccinations, says we have to make sure that we prioritize the vulnerable communities. And that would be Black and Latino communities, really your focus. And yet, there's not very many of the actual program decisioned dollars that, if you read policy that says we have to this is directed to that population. Right. And it is frustrating. Like I said, I don't begrudge any elected official who sees a pot of money and says, I'm going to get some for me. But I don't believe that the thinking around what would be done with, for example, the ARPA money, everybody's so excited, the recovery money was to fund the aquarium and the museums of science and the boiler rooms and the parks. And still, we've not been able to drill down and fill the holes of the needs for the nonprofit community or business community in urban centers like Boston. And so it's a constant struggle. Yeah. And so I know that the New Commonwealth Fund's role and presence is critical, because even when manna is flowing from heaven, we still are struggling to get our share when they say that it's for us. Right.
No, I take very seriously the power of the dollar and how hard it's been to raise those dollars, but also how much more is out there and how many pledges were made by other corporations that have not been fulfilled yet, that, in name only. So I'm looking forward to calling those opportunities out and giving folks a chance to make good on their commitments.
So here, the other thing is this, Makiba, because of what you're doing right now, like the fact that those 19 Black and brown corporate execs, C-suite execs, were able to be successful. And you just mentioned too that there are many commitments made, even separate from the NCF. We saw it all over the city. We saw it in the state. We saw it nationally. Yeah, I want to be optimistic. Here's the if we are not able to capitalize in this moment, this is my bottom line. Um, the city of Boston has a surplus, right? You're reading the articles about the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has a surplus. In fact, I think the Globe article said Massachusetts has a surplus. Massachusetts is flush with cash and don't know what to do with it. And I'm thinking,
we do.
You're right. We do. And really, my point is that we've really never. I've been in a legislature where we were, where we're fighting. Like we got X number of dollars to spend. That's it. And you're fighting to get your little space, your little corner of the world
Right.
for your constituents. And I'm feeling right now, when I said optimistic, I know it made a sound, but I am, because I think that if we're ever in a position to make some major change and do the kind of reset that we keep talking about, we've never been in a position financially better than we are right now to do it. And so we got to step up the level of advocacy and making our case. I'm going to be rolling out a major, just talking with people, talking with hundreds of people, and I'll be in touch with you to talk to you about this. But if we're ever going to do it, the time to do it is now, which is why I think what you're doing is so important. You know that, and I heard you loud and clear. We so much of the announcements were very public, right? And I remember when one of our sports team put the big banner, the Black Lives Matter banner, on the Massachusetts Turnpike, and I said then, we'll see how much they matter 2 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
When the dust settles and kind of the gleam is gone, if the corporate boards look differently, right? If your contracting activity looks more diverse, and if your C-suites are more diverse, then we'll know you meant that. But if the dust settles and it looks just like it did when we started, then we'll know what it was. But I do believe that there's a level of good intention and lack of knowledge about how to do it.
Yeah. And I would similarly say, I think the time is now, if not ever, also because Boston has a number of Black and Brown folks in leadership roles in moments and in roles that have never been held for us before, both in philanthropy, but also in, different corporations. I mean, I think I have a lot of colleagues that we all have to really get it together and have a voice. And we have started to do that. And it feels good to know that, I can pick up a phone and call Betty Francisco at the Boston Impact Initiative and say, we need to write an op-ed on clean energy. I
saw it, and it was wonderful. And more of that.
And, these kinds of moments where, we galvanize together and we say, we are in leadership roles. We do have a responsibility, but we don't have to do it by ourselves.
That's right.
So
that's right. And I think we have to be patient. And I think I'll wind on this note. One of the things that, I don't even know that we didn't talk directly about it, but all of our conversations these days kind of center and work around the reality of race and racism. And one of the things that I think we have to acknowledge is the sometimes toxicity, but certainly I would say, if there's a word, the third railness of that subject. And so it means that not only will the folks who have been on the side and recipients of the downside of it often say things that seem harsh in expressing their feeling, people on the other side of it who really are meaning well and have good intentions around addressing it may say things in a way that don't sound as soft as we would like, that we have to be patient. You
Mhm.
know, we have to be patient, not, and I'm not talking about Brown versus Board of Education, patient. I'm talking about um, being careful that we can identify the different people who are really trying to figure it out
Right.
versus people who are obstructing. Because I do think that there are a lot of people who are trying to figure it out, don't
Mhm.
really know how, may
Mm.
not say it right, right? And if we pound away on them, then they clam up when we can't get there. And so that's what I mean by the patience.
And can I just, I'll add one additional piece to that, which is what I've been learning and being reinforced is in all of my incredible conversations with these leaders, it has struck me that we have spent a lot of time talking about what is broken. We spend so much time dealing with what is oppressive and wrong about these systems, so much so that I've had to stop meetings and say, I asked us to talk, we were supposed to be talking about what it looks like and it works. And we don't practice that enough. So it's very hard to do. So I would invite all of us folks who are out here doing this work and directly and indirectly to take permission to think about
Yes.
what is possible, think about how beautiful we are as a people, how capable we are, what our assets are, and try to articulate that for ourselves on a regular basis because it's hard.
It's very hard, but we have to do it. We talked just kind of in passing about our children. For me, that's what it's all about. You come from BPS at one point, on in the inner sanctum, and so one of the things that has been weighing very heavily on my mind in terms of programs and what we need to be thinking about is the fact that our children in Boston, we have the largest public school system. Majority of the 53,000 students are Black and Latina, Black and Latino, and many, ESL, many special need. That was before COVID. That was going into COVID. We talked
Right.
about the racial achievement gap. And our children were literally in isolation for
Yeah.
2.5 education cycles.
Yeah.
And the first year, what we did, I'm the generous royal we, as they say, because I didn't think it made sense, but that's not my decision. But the decision was made to socially promote all of our children in year one of
Mm.
COVID.
Mm.
In year two, even though that year two had been interrupted, right? Remember, we're going back in September. Nope. Going back in October. Nope. Going back. Nope. Um, there was no discussion about what we were going to do.
Right.
We kind of kept the doors open so the kids who managed to get in or get online and live in a place where they had access to internet were able to continue some sense of matriculation. But what we already know, I mean, I think if BPS says 25 to 30% of the students never got online, that's probably more like 40, right?
Right. No.
So, so So I have been horrified at what I think is this silent conspiracy or
Mm.
this conspiracy of silence, and that we really are not talking about it. Like, so we're supposed to just forget that? And I'm talking with retired teachers about a plan to do something bold and transformative around an immersion program to make up for that at least the last 2 years. We already were living in an educational achievement, a racial gap.
I
So
want to know
anybody
more
think it got
about
better?
that, Diane. That I
Pardon?
want to know more about that.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely, absolutely. Think about that. Now, because you and I'm a little older than you, but still from the generation that said from kindergarten, third grade, you learn to read. So
Yeah.
that from third grade on, you can read to learn. Well, what happens if you skip 2 of those years in the K to 3? We're just
Right.
going to put you in the 3 and say good luck, because that's literally, Dr. McCreary, what we've done. So instead of waiting for BPS to figure it out, there is a gathering, growing around an internal, kind of community focused response that will be directly addressing Black and Latino students in particular.
Mm.
a total immersion program. And I think that we have to do it. Like,
Mm,
it's our responsibility to do it. Like, think about it. Like, they literally skipped 2 grades.
right. Right. No. And I have a 17-year-old, so on the other end of the spectrum,
Ah, right?
you
Think
know,
about the kids that were in the 10th grade. They got
yeah,
socially promoted to 11th. And then the 11th grade is the ones that are focused on, we've all been through that. Like, what? I
yeah,
couldn't imagine doing that.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
was one of those students who was, I did very well, but I didn't want to skip a grade. I certainly didn't want to skip a grade of high school.
Right.
But so it's on my mind. Stuff
Thank
is
you for your
happening, and I will,
leadership in that, Senator. That's fantastic. I'm
I'll be
excited.
in touch with you about that, because I think we have to do something. We can't just forget it. Like, wait a minute. And so I am going to ask you to come back,
Okay.
because I have a feeling that the New Commonwealth Fund is going to be, like I said, just moving and growing into a space and a place of extreme importance as we do this work. And all of the experiences that you've had kind of getting to this place are going to be helpful in taking you there to take us there. So, any final thoughts or things coming up you might want to talk about? 2 things. Again, what the next cycle is,
Yeah.
and people have contact information for NCF.
Yes. So really important for folks to go to our website. When you go to the website, newcommonwealthfund.org, there's a pop-up that asks you if you want to be on our mailing list. Sign up, and that's the way we're communicating any sort of in the moment deadlines or changes or announcements. We'll have info sessions that will be happening in August, September, and October to help people sort of understand where we are. We're evolving. We're still a baby. I'm going to have my first year anniversary next month. Fund is only 3 years old, so people should anticipate that we are going to, as we learn, we will grow and we will refine our strategy. I think the only other thing I would say is look at the folks that we've funded and note some of the ones that are you've not learned about before, because every single one of them are doing phenomenal work on behalf of our communities, and they should really be lifted up.
That's wonderful, everyone. So I want to thank Dr. Makiba McCrary, who's the president of the New Commonwealth Fund, and out here doing that work, really maintaining and creating important support for the nonprofits that really are holding this community together.
That's right.
And we'll have her back, because I want to continue to follow what you're doing. I tell folks in the end, Doc, most of our the folks who will view this, because it'll be available like in the next hour. I tell folks to get your cup of tea or your glass of wine on Friday night or over the weekend. Get up in the corner and turn it on, because every 30-minute show that we do, there's information. And that's really what I think is the WWOC's focus and mission, is to bring people information that they can use in a timely fashion. So hopefully today you all have learned some things you didn't know about the New Commonwealth Fund and what they're doing, and know that WWOCmedia.com Facebook Live, that you can watch this anytime. So we'll be sharing it. I'll make sure I share it with you so you can send to people to watch. It's a good commercial for you. Kind of you
Right.
have to even right. You have to schedule videographers, but to send to people, to show them, hear you talking about what it is that you do. We'll be back next week, continuing this conversation about all things Black, Brown, and COVID. Don't forget, City Councilor Mejia will be on at 8, and I'm sure sharing with you some of the news of the day around what she's dealing with on education. We have a new superintendent, still a whole lot of work to do. And as the chair of the Education Committee, she's also knee deep in the processing of the home rule petition to prepare for the state legislature to sign to reinstate Boston's elected school committee. And so there's a lot happening, but WWOC Media is going to be here. I appreciate you, Senator Dianne Wilkerson, signing off. Dr. McCreary, thank you again. This has been great. We'll talk soon.
Definitely. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.